The 1911 style handgun has been one of the most successful self-defense handguns of all time. Designed in the early 1900s by John Browning, this pistol is the grandfather of all modern automatic handguns. Currently, it is being built by no less than 10 different companies worldwide. And while its design is almost perfect, the 1911 is basically a fighting pistol, designed for the battlefield, where regular maintenance may not be possible and ammunition may not be exactly up to specifications. Hence, generous proportions are given to tolerances and clearances so that the gun will function with just about any ammunition in almost any circumstances. This allowance for reliability, however, affects the overall accuracy and has paved the way for a complete industry based on custom modifications that not only tighten up the tolerances, but also improve the handling and reliability and accuracy of the 1911 pistol. Wilson Combat has, for the past 20 years, provided the highest quality, state-of-the-art customizing services of the 1911 pistol for self-defense, competition, and law enforcement applications. In addition, Wilson Combat designs, develops, manufactures, and sells high-quality aftermarket parts and accessories for the 1911 pistol, as well as other handguns. Wilson has emerged as the industry leader in parts, accessories, and customizing services for the 1911 handgun. This video is titled Building the Ultimate 1911 Self-Defense Handgun and features Bill Wilson of Wilson Combat and Ken Hackathorn. Wilson is an inventor, patent holder, author, champion competition shooter, master gunsmith, and the founder of Wilson Combat. He's been actively shooting and working with the 1911 style handguns for more than 25 years. He is not only an excellent pistol marksman, but also well-versed in the defensive use of handgun tactics and techniques. Ken Hackathorn is one of the world's foremost authorities on the subject of the tactical deployment of small arms. He has trained U.S. military special forces, FBI, police, and anti-terrorist units. He has been involved in the tactical application of handguns for more than 25 years. Together, these two gentlemen are uniquely qualified to bring you the information you're about to see. Now, here's Bill Wilson and Ken Hackathorn and the master gunsmiths from Wilson's Gun Shop with Building the Ultimate 1911 Self-Defense Handgun.
Okay, we're here today to talk about the 1911 style pistol and its advantages as far as self-defense shooting is concerned, and the way it's kind of been proven through the years on the street and proven to be the fastest weapon for high-speed shooting and competition. And we're just going to discuss kind of a little bit of history on the 1911 and the advantages and what type of modifications that we recommend to be done to these pistols, and discuss the equipment that Ken and I actually use and the equipment that we've used in all the segments of this video.
We'll talk about the history first, Ken?
Sure. That's, I think one of the things that's important to remember is that while occasionally we have individuals tell us that there are many firearms on the market that are suitable for self-defense, and there are, we're going to talk about them in a later segment, that initially we're talking about a pistol that was adopted for use by the U.S. military in 1911, and here we are in the final closing years of the 20th century. So this is certainly not a new handgun. This basic 1911 service pistol has been around and in use. As a matter of fact, it's served 3 generations of American fighting men, and as such, it's been proven to be a very effective tool. I think one thing we should remember that in this case we've got a 1911 A1, a World War II generation 45 pistol, this one made by Remington Rand, that in its basic configuration as it is, without any modifications, it has been proven to be an excellent fighting instrument. It's done a superb job. But what we've learned over the years is that the 1911 A1 pistol, there are certain things you can do to improve it. And what we're going to discuss here briefly are some of the improvements, some of the modifications that have become more or less standardized. And we'll discuss both those that Bill and I both believe are something you definitely want to have done to your pistol to improve its performance. And we'll also discuss some of the things we think you would probably like to have done. And it's important to understand the difference between spending a little bit of money on your pistol to have it tuned to your own specifications, and a lot of money is just what your tastes are. I think it's important to understand that historically, for centuries, warriors have taken their instruments, their tools of the trade, and many of them have had them adjusted or tuned or manufactured to meet their own specifications. So there's nothing new about taking an instrument and modifying it so it performs better for you. I've always owned a .45. It's been my primary choice of a sidearm. I've learned to shoot it fairly well. I'm not a real good shot, but I'm an adequate shot, and I've learned to like the .45. When I first got involved in what we call practical shooting back in the early 70s, in my community, a bunch of us got together on an informal basis to have what we considered combat matches. And mind you, we didn't know much about what we were doing. We did a lot of things wrong. But typically, most people that showed up to shoot in these informal little events were using revolvers. The police service revolver was the standard. A lot of us were law enforcement officers, so we shot revolvers. I was one of the first guys to show up and start using an automatic. I had a 1911 .45 automatic. One of my other friends was shooting a Smith & Wesson Model 39, and we were considered somewhat rogues because we weren't in the norm. We were shooting those inaccurate, unreliable, dangerous automatic pistols. But it didn't take us long to prove two things to ourselves. One, that our performances with the automatic pistols tended to be superior to the guys with revolvers. And candidly, when any of the events required us to shoot quickly, to deal with multiple targets, and particularly to maintain continuity of fire where we had to reload our weapons, we clearly were superior to the guys with the revolvers. And I think at that point in time, and that would have been in the early 70s, the trend then was beginning to change from the revolver to the autoloading pistol. So I think it's important to understand whether it's a GI pistol like this and it's an original configuration, or let's just take a basic Colt, in this case a Series 70 government model, just as it comes out of the box. It's a good weapon and certainly will do the job for you. But as Bill and I are going to talk about, there's a lot of things you can do to the gun to improve it so it'll be probably more effective in your hands. And I think probably one of the first things we should talk about is the basic improvements and the ones that both Bill and I agree on. And in each case, I think the things most people will talk about is you want a pistol that's reliable. And that's what it means when you purchase your handgun, you should buy some ammo, hopefully a couple hundred rounds, and go out to the range and shoot it to ensure that the weapon functions and works properly. And that applies to any handgun, not just an 1911. Once you're satisfied your pistol is reliable, remember you got to have good ammunition and good magazines. And I'll tell you right now, magazine-wise, my experience, and I've been around this thing for a long time, a quarter of a century. I've shot them extensively. I've trained with them. I was an instructor in the military. I've learned that one of the greatest weak links in the 1911 pistol is the huge variety of magazines. You know, when the government was using the 1911 pistol, they had many contractors. Some built superb quality magazine. Some, unfortunately, built terrible ones. And in the aftermarket, you can go to some gun shops and typically gun shows, and you'll find a lot of $5 magazines. And like everything in life, you get what you pay for. My experience has been that the most reliable magazine I've ever seen or used is a Wilson Rogers 7-round magazine. I've used them for ages. I have some of the first ones that Bill sent me to test. When did those things come on the market, Bill? Early 80s?
Yeah, about 1980, maybe 81, something like that.
And he sent me some of the very first ones and said, try these and tell me what you think. I'm still using them today. I've never had a problem with them. They've been abused, they've been stepped on, they've been dropped in the mud and the sand. I found no magazine to equal the Wilson Rogers 7-round magazine. I think we'll talk about, besides a reliable gun, a couple of things that we both agree the gun will do better with is obviously a good trigger pull. And Bill's shop has established a reputation for a good, clean, what we call sear release. And the other thing is an improvement on the sights. The existing sights are okay. They were real good when I was 20 years old and my vision was real good, and I could see that little small front sight. But now as I've gotten older and I need all the help I can get, I find an improved sight picture, something that's a higher profile, easier to pick up, is an improvement.
A change in sights is one of the most important modifications we can make to 1911. The Series 70 guns and the GI guns had extremely small sights that were kind of hard to see, and through the years the factories have seen the deficiencies in those, and the new Colts like the 1991 A1s and the new Springfield Armories have higher profile sights. But even though the factory sights are higher profile, they both have one problem in common. They've cut the rear notches so narrow that there's hardly any light on either side of the sight when you get a sight picture. So in any kind of low light configuration, you really have trouble getting a good sight picture. And while you can get by with the factory sights by widening them out, they're also pretty bad to cut your hand if you're wiping away a smokestack or hanging on your clothes and that sort of thing. So we recommend more of a low profile type, snag-free type sight. Sight's tall enough to get a good sight picture, and frankly, it's much faster to line the sights when you have a higher profile sight. And in the evening hours and the nighttime, like most shootings occur, we highly recommend tritium inserts in the sights. And the particular night sights we sell, we call them night eyes. We have a bright green tritium in the front, and we have 2 subdued yellow tritium inserts in the rear that are about half as bright as the one in the front. That makes your eye automatically be drawn to the front sight where your eye should be drawn. So we highly recommend high visibility sights, preferably tritium sights, and frankly, Ken, I think you'll agree, adjustable sights are great for competition, but for a carry gun, a serious real-world gun, they really serve no advantage.
Absolutely. I obviously own some pistols with adjustable sights, and they're very nice. They're more expensive than the fixed sights. They're generally not quite as rugged. And I can remember the first adjustable sight pistol I owned was there was an era a couple decades ago when the Smith & Wesson K revolver sight was what we commonly put on the gun. And I can remember I took the gun out, did the initial 0, and got the pistol shooting on it, never touched it again. And even though you buy for example, one of the most popular sights for the 1911 is the Bomar. Particularly, it's low mounted, and Bill does a superb job of it in the shop. And it's a great sight, but once you initially zero it, I don't know, I hardly ever hear of anybody that once it's zeroed ever make any more adjustments.
When we install the night eye sights, basically we have the standard height on the rear sight, which is adjustable in the notch by drifting it from side to side to adjust your windage. In the front, we install a dovetail front sight that we have in varying heights. We have 4 or 5 different sight heights. So basically, by doing a couple of measurements, we put the one on it we think will zero for that gun. We go to the range, shoot a couple of shots, see if it's on. If it's not, then we know whether to go up or down on the sight height to get that particular one to 0. And another advantage, if you get a gun where the hole in the slide that the barrel runs in is a little off center or drilled a little bit crooked, like does happen, you get a deal where when you zero the gun, the rear sight's hanging all the way off one side. That's another advantage of the dovetail front sight. You can take some of that adjustment out of the front and some at the rear, and you can keep the rear sight pretty well centered, and it doesn't affect your high-speed shooting that way.
Shouldn't take much. A little shot of oil on it before you try to drive the sight. Makes them a lot easier to install. Now we'll install the front sight. You'll also have to break the edges on it as we did the rear one. Our front one also needs opened up just a little. If you take care whenever you're machining the front dovetail and then whenever you're installing the sights in your vise, you can get by with this without refinishing the slide. When drifting this front sight into place, you need to be sure and only strike it on the lower part and not up on the blade section, or you might damage your insert.
I think one of the other things we need to talk about is and this has always been a hot topic with talking about the 1911 pistol, is trigger pulls. And candidly, what most of us believe, that if you carry a gun for self-defense, the trigger pull on your 1911 pistol should probably be set at about 4 to 5 pounds. Now, we've heard all kinds of rumors, and we know that particularly that the pistol is as popular as in competition, and I think it's important to point out that even though we're told that there's all these advantages to the newer generation of service pistols, and mind you, they're all very good, whether it be the Beretta, the Glock, the SIGs, the Smith & Wessons, they're all superb pistols, very reliable, very effective. But very few of them offer the shootability that a 1911 pistol does. Most of them have longer or heavier trigger pulls. That this pistol can be, the trigger pull, or we call it sear release, can be adjusted on this weapon to the point where it can be adjusted down to about 2 pounds, or of course it can be adjusted up to its 8 to 10. And what we know, of course, is the optimum range for your best performance for a gun you carry is probably going to be in the range of about 4 to 5 pounds. The typical 1911A1 service pistol, the one that was built during the Second World War, the government specs was 5 to 6 pounds. So what you're normally going to find is a trigger pull that's got very short stroke, nice easy sear release, and this is a standard as issue GI pistol. And the trigger pull on this thing, I'm going to guess, is about 5 pounds. And I assure you would do a fine job as is. The competition shooters, and like I said again, as I say, the guys who want to win matches, and because they have to shoot quickly and very, very accurately, all choose a 1911 pistol. Now, a lot of people make references to the correlation that competition is not the real life, and that's absolutely true. It's apples and oranges. But I think it's important. One of the things we know in real life as well as in competition is hits are your goal. And we know that the shootability of the 1911 pistol is one of its major virtues. Anybody who is serious about shooting a handgun, I assure you, will learn to shoot this weapon quicker and more effectively than they will anything else. I think there's a reason why the most elite special operations units in the United States, in the world for that matter, because our special operations people are the best in the world, use a 1911 pistol. The U.S. Army's most elite special operations unit continues to issue a custom modified 1911 A1 45 service pistol. Many of you who read some of the popular gun press have followed and realized that just recently in the past year, the FBI HRT, our federal government's most elite special operation unit, has just adopted a high capacity 1911 pistol. It's a para ordnance, but it's a single action 1911 45 pistol. Just recently, the FBI is in the process now of looking at adopting standard single column 1911 45 pistols for their FBI SWAT teams, because they've recognized that these are the people who are put in a position where they are expected to do the shooting, and they want to give them a gun that is going to be accurate and easy to shoot. Remember, we have to shoot with precision in order to be effective. And this weapon system has been around for a long time, and it still remains the one of choice. And one of the main reasons is everybody says, well, it's a single action gun. And that alarms a lot of people. Well, it's a single action gun, and you have to carry it cocked and locked, and you absolutely do. And I can tell you, and I know Bill's had the same experience, I can remember in my early days as a deputy sheriff carrying my pistol cocked and locked in my holster. People would come up to me and say, hey, your gun's cocked. And my reply would be, yeah, I know.
I hope so.
Yeah. And then the next statement would generally be, well, isn't that dangerous? And I would typically say, yep. And then they leave you alone. They get away from you. But it's a perfectly safe means of carrying the pistol. It's the way it's actually designed to be carried.
Basically, reliability is number one. I mean, the gun's got to go off every time you pull the trigger. And typically the weak link in a 1911 service pistol, especially, like in a factory gun like this, the weak link in this gun will be, as it comes from the factory, the vast majority of them have no extractor tension on them. The factory is just, they've drilled a hole in the slide and they've dropped an extractor in it and they've shipped it out the door. There's been no attempt to make sure it has proper extractor tension. And a gun that's adjusted properly, extractor is held in place. It's actually bent towards the center line to where when you slide a cartridge up under the extractor, it actually contains that cartridge and holds it in place. And that's imperative to these guns working every time, both as far as feeding reliability and ejection extraction reliability. So that's the number one thing, is make sure it works, and the first thing to look at on making the gun work is the extractor adjusted and fitted properly.
And the way the extractor works is reviewing the slide this way, this being the muzzle and this being the back. The gun, or as the extractor sits in the slide, case is in the magazine, and when it goes to feed up underneath there, it's at a slight angle, and it needs to be able to slip up underneath there and come straight in the gun as it goes in the chamber. Now, if you notice right here, again, I said there's no radius there. It's a pretty sharp angle right here. We're going to have to relieve a little bit of that right there. Not a lot, just smooth that down to where that flows, to where that extractor can slip up underneath there rather than snap or stop and not slip up underneath there. It needs to slip up underneath there with some tension and smooth, so it engages the extractor groove and the case rim underneath the hook of the extractor. So we're going to remove some metal to where we can get some tension on the case. That's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to remove a whole lot, but we're just going to get it down a little bit.
Rounding it over.
Yeah, just
the same shape.
right, staying with what we've got, but we're just moving down. 9 times out of 10, if you get everything else done right and you put your extractor in, you still, after you've slightly bent this and putting tension on it, you still don't have any tension. You've still got too much metal there. That'll fool you a lot of times. Okay, that probably ought to be enough. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this small square file and we're going to clean up this flat in here. We're going to try to get it flush and flat. It looks pretty flat right now, and get out any tool marks and just make it level, make it smooth for that case rim to slide in and out on.
Show us exactly what you turn it over to the other camera up top. What you try to do there.
Well, if you remember, that was straight right through there. Now we've got a little bit of an angle on it, about the angle that lies with my file right there. Instead of being flush and square, it's a little more out this way, very slightly down.
Just on that top edge.
Right. And if you position your extractor, think about it when it's in the slide like that, your cases are going to be feeding up, so it needs a little bit of relief to get in there, to get up into that notch and under that hook.
So that's the object.
Right. So all I'm going to do now is, after we've made this little cut right here, I'm just going to clean it up a little bit and also let it flow down with that radius there where the case lip feeds onto that.
This is just a finer bit.
Right, it's just, we're back to that fine square file again. And again, just keeping everything with, then we're going to move it up just ahead of this little notch right here. And pretty much do the same thing.
And you advise keeping your thumb there so you don't
Yeah,
break
right.
that.
You want to always support that there. And then take it out, and as you can also probably see, it's no longer straight. It's got a little bit of curve in it.
How much curve do you need, or does that change from gun to gun?
Well, that'll change from gun to gun. Really what we're looking for is the tension, the way it feels when you slip a case underneath there. I'm sure this is probably too much, but that way I can put it in the slide and be able to work it a little bit slightly here and put it back in and check it with the dummy round underneath the hook.
The next thing to look at is the relationship of the feed ramp of the barrel to the barrel throat. I know in the early days when I was reading stuff about how to work on 1911s and trying to learn a little bit about how to build 1911s, and we're going back quite a ways here, back into the late 70s, and everything I could read on it said, well, you polish the feed ramp to a mirror finish, and you polish it to where when you set the barrel in there, the barrel and feed ramp are one. I mean,
Perfectly in line.
Perfectly in line.
Right.
Well, as I started working on my own guns and playing with this, years ago, it didn't take me long to figure out that wasn't necessarily good information, because there's a certain amount of tolerance in these guns, and the way the barrel floats around in there. So what you've got, let's see if I can get this where I can show you here. What you've got on typically on most of these guns, the barrel has quite a bit of up and down play on it. So as the cartridge feeds up the feed ramp, the barrel lifts off the feed ramp. If that blend line is exactly at the same place as that barrel lifts up, that in effect makes it hang over the feed ramp. The cartridge goes up the feed ramp, hooks the bottom of the barrel, and we got a jam. So it didn't take long to figure out that there has to be a slight little step there, about a 32nd of an inch or something. I think we try to set ours at a 32nd of an inch from the top edge of the feed ramp to where the barrel throat starts. And that enables, if the barrel lifts up, it comes up the feed ramp, jumps the little gap there, and goes right on, hits on the throat of the barrel and right into the chamber. So those two modifications are critical to make the gun run.
You can apply more pressure with this to get a brighter shine on the feed ramp.
Okay, so what do you got? How's it look?
Looks pretty good. And at the end of it, you just want to make sure that you go back and inspect and make sure there's not any tool marks left or nicks and cuts in any way. And I believe that one's ready to go. It looks pretty uniform.
That just kind of cuts that metal right off.
Right. It does a pretty good job. You just want to blend it in as much as you can.
Not taking it down a whole lot, but just
No, not very much. Just getting a few curls out of there. I'm just going to go ahead down here on this flat, and it'll be easier if I take the bigger tool marks out now to polish it up later. Again, the slower you take it, the better off you'll be. You won't take too much off, because that's not good. Okay.
how do you know when it's done?
Well, when I get it all flowing in together and get all the tool marks out, get it all shiny, we'll call it good. And two, this is something that, probably everybody should have done, or, you know, it just helps reliability and helps feed different types of ammunition. A lot of times if a stock gun will feed one, it usually won't feed too many others. Now, you see they're all shined up, polished up, it's pretty slick. The little sharp edge is long gone, the tool marks are out, and should feed pretty good. Then you always want to take it back out, make sure that, just put it back in the frame and take a look at it.
So it matches up.
Yep, you see how she looks, make sure you maintain your gap from the feed ramp to the barrel. You got to be in pretty good shape.
Little bit of focus, Jack. So that's what it's supposed to look like, and it's all polished all around,
Yep.
and no tool marks.
Got your feed ramp polished, got your barrel throated and polished, and should feed real good.
So those two modifications are critical to make the gun run. And the other thing affecting reliability basically is having the proper spring for the proper type of load. And my good friend Walt Wolf, he makes springs of every configuration. Makes them for 1911 from 7 pounds to what, 26 pounds or something like that. I don't know what are you going to use those two extremes for, I don't know, but basically for full charge, self-defense, service type ammo, hardball, jacket hollow point load, stuff like that. I think Ken and I both agree the 18.5 pound spring is basically what you want in the gun. The factory spring rate is normally 15 or 16 pounds, and which will probably function reliable, but it's putting quite a bit of extra stress on your gun and quite a bit extra beating on your gun because it's not slowing the slide down quite as much as we would like. And we found the 18.5 to still eject totally reliable and be a little bit easier on your gun, and plus you got a little bit extra spring tension to make sure the chamber's dirty, the ammo's not quite perfect, to go ahead and ram that cartridge in the chamber and make the gun close so it will fire.
Do you have a preference in trigger pull weight, Bill, for the guns you carry?
For the guns I use personally, yes I do, and it's probably a little lighter than you recommend and most people recommend. I've always been kind of a fan of reasonably light trigger pulls. I normally set my personal guns at about 3¼ pounds, and typically most customers we have for self-defense guns, they normally specify they want a trigger pull of between 3.5 and 4. That seems to be the weight that most people ask for.
I find that back in the days when I was very active in IPSC competition, much like Bill, I kind of liked a trigger pull of a 3.5 pounds. But as I got out of competition, and I've kept my duty gun at about a 4 to 4.5 pound trigger, what I've done over the years is I've kind of evolved more towards the carry weight trigger pull, 4 to 4.5 pounds. I've learned, for example, this is my pistol right now. This is a gun that Bill built for me a couple years ago, and the trigger pull on it right now I'm going to guess is probably a little over 4, between 4 and 4.5 pounds. And what I found is it really doesn't make much difference. Once you learn the control of the trigger, I shoot it just as effectively. This is my match gun now. When I shoot competition, I use this pistol. It's the gun I carry. So I try to make sure that I've just become accustomed to what I consider a duty trigger pull, which is probably between 4 and 5 pounds for 1911. You've heard a lot of people talk about, well, the 1911 pistol is dangerous because it's got too light of a trigger. But one of the interesting things I've always thought was kind of interest in the last decade or so is you go out and buy, let's say, a new Colt pistol that comes out of the box with a factory spec trigger of 5 to 6 pounds, like this one, 5 to 6. As a matter of fact, that's a pretty nice trigger on this gun.
Yeah, that's not a bad factory trigger.
It's a good factory trigger. But you go out and buy a standard Glock, and the spec on it is a 5 to 6 pound trigger. So it seems to me, and of course people feel one's safe and one isn't. In my mind, I can't see much difference, except of course the 1911 does have a manual safety, so you can make sure it's not going to go off if you put your finger on the trigger.
I'm gonna prep the hammer.
Okay, what do you got to do to do that?
Okay, let's go over to the vise. You want to just snug it up in there, not very hard, because you could break it. And what I'm using here is a file from Brownells that I've got. It's a hammer cutting file, and it's got 2 safe edges on it. And what you're gonna do first is cut your bottom flat first, making sure you keep everything square.
So you're squaring it up, huh?
Right. It's already pretty much square like it is, but the only way to be sure is to cut it yourself and check it like that. And then you'll want to cut the face of the hooks right back here to make the corner square. And then after you get that cut and looking like you want it, you need to go and cut the height of the hooks down. Now we don't recommend you go below 18 thousandths or 20 thousandths. Just cutting the height of them down. You could use a feeler gauge to lay on top of it to cut them, but you can eyeball it too.
Okay, both those at the same time, right?
Right. You gotta be sure you keep both of them the exact same height. Trying to get the strut back into it. Okay, here we've got a feeler gauge here that you can use to check the depth of your hooks. This one's a 21 thousandths gauge. And you can lay it right down on top of there and see how close you come up with. And that's right around 20 or 21 right there. And you could lay it on there and cut it down with a file, right down to it to be precise.
Right down to the feeler gauge itself.
Yeah, right down to the gauge itself. And then you want to take your hammer pin, make sure it goes in, it's not too loose or anything like that. Make sure there's not any burrs anywhere inside the hole. And if that goes in all right, you've pretty much got everything done to your hammer for now anyway. And from there, we'll go on to the sear. What we'll do is we'll cut the nose on a sear jig.
What do you got there?
Okay, this is a Tom Wilson sear jig that we got from Brownells. And it's an adjustable jig where you can adjust the amount of angle you've got on your sear. I use a medium Arkansas stone, the right size for it to cut the sear nose itself.
Okay, so you just lay the sear right into that jig.
Yeah, you lay it right in there, and it's got a set screw in the back inside of it there that adjusts how much your sear tilts in and out.
So you almost really need this sear jig, huh?
Yeah, it's very important. The angle we use is basically a stock Colt sear angle. All we're doing is polishing it up, putting a higher polish on it, keeping the exact same angle that it is. And as you do your trigger job, you may need to back the angle off or give it more angle to suit the gun, to see, depend on from gun to gun what you have.
So you're really not taking any metal off, you're just kind of polishing it up.
Right.
You're using what kind of stone there?
Using a medium Arkansas stone. And I put a little bit of oil on it to make it last longer and cut better.
Okay. How many times do you run over top?
Just a few times. And that's pretty much all it takes there. You have to be careful and keep everything nice and square. Okay, I've just polished the end of the sear nose just a little bit, keeping the same basic angle that it had, which is real close to Colt sear angle. You've got a real sharp edge
Like a
on the
burr?
bottom side, yeah. It's similar to a burr, and it's you need to take that off to get good contact with your sear and your hammer. We just take a number 2 cut pillar file that's wide enough to cut it. And we stay with this angle here, which is basically flat with the bottom part right here. And we just cut a small flat on the bottom of that to even everything up. Okay, this trigger only weighs 80 grains, which is a lot lighter than the factory trigger is. Now they're using plastic and steel combination, and all the older ones use solid steel triggers.
Right.
And so now, what you got when you go to a light trigger like this is you don't get much of your trigger bounce that you would with a solid steel trigger, which could trip your sear and make your hammer fall under when you're dropping the slide. Okay, the only thing it needs is it needs a small flat cut on the back surface here from basically here down. And what that does is whenever your trigger's all the way back, it keeps your spring, your middle sear spring, from touching your sear. Keeps your trigger from pushing your sear spring off of your disconnector, which sets right on top of it like this.
So you cut it down a little bit.
Yeah, but your disconnector will set basically right here, and from the end of the disconnector down, you need to cut a small flat onto it to clear the sear spring. Yeah, if you took too much off, you'd end up with a lot of excess play up and down, and that makes your trigger feel really bad. It's got a lot to do with how the trigger feels. A Colt trigger, just a stock trigger, has a lot of up and down play in it. The idea on everything is to keep everything in line with everything, and everything square to everything, and keeping that from moving up and down as much as possible just helps, in the reliability and the complete workings of the trigger. Okay, and one other thing you might watch for after you get the trigger fit into it, making sure the bowl isn't bent too far in. If it's bent too far in, it'll stick out into the mag well, where you'll have it catching on the magazine. You don't want to have it sticking out their end all. When it fits up right, it should lay completely flush with the sides. Yeah, the stirrup itself, you want to make sure it doesn't stick out into the frame. And then from there we can go on to the prepping the disconnector. And I've got one that's finished here and one that's not.
Are these both Wilson parts?
These are the factory Colt parts. Some of your old Colts have got machine parts, like the sears are. The newer ones have got cast parts in there that will have casting ridges and stuff.
Just like that line right there you pointed out.
Right. Yeah. You can feel it, and they'll have them up on top. They'll basically run the complete length of the disconnector, right over the top and down the other side. And what you need to do is, on this surface here, you need to polish this out. It may take a file to get the worst part out, and then once you get the worst of it out, you can just take a polishing stick and polish it till it's nice and flat and nice and smooth. You don't want to remove any more material than you have to.
Right, so really just kind of polishing out the burrs and the ridges.
Right. And then after you do that, you've got a corner right here on the stock disconnector. You can see it. That corner there could possibly stick out into the mag well when it sets in the gun. To prevent anything like that happening, any problems with it interfering with anything, we usually just round this corner off a little bit. You can do that at the same time you're polishing this flat here. And then after you get that done, you can go to this back part here. And this is the part that the spring itself lays on. And you can see the marks here from where the spring had been riding on it right there. And you want to just take a file and remove just as small amount as possible off of it to clean it up and just polish it out with a polishing stick. And once you get everything polished on it and everything, then you just keep moving on to different parts. Like this is the 80 series gun here. It's a good idea on the 80 series levers to take and polish the sides of them just a little bit in case they have any kind of burrs or anything kicked up on them.
That's just a pretty simple polishing stick, and you're just kind of
Right, just rubbing it over the top of it and
clean it up a little bit.
just
right?
clean it up and smoothing things out. And then it's a good idea to take a real fine stick and polishing this top surface here where it engages the plunger and slide. We can go to the spring now.
What's usually the case with these springs? What seems to be the problem from the factory?
They put a lot of tension on them from the factory for, you know, reliability reasons and things. It's got a lot of arc in each of the springs. The first thing you need to do is take a polishing stick and lightly radius this edge here and this edge here where they contact the disconnector and the sear. That's
Not a file, just a polishing stick.
Yeah, just a polishing stick. It doesn't take but just a very little bit. And you just break that edge there. And then what you'll need to do is to adjust your spring. Now it's got a lot of tension on it like it is. And when you get adjusted, it'll look basically like that. It'll have about that much arc to it. But you can fool around with that a little bit more after you get to working on the trigger. Because you usually have to adjust them even more after that. And from there, your original mainspring is heavier than we sell a 19-pound reduced power mainspring, and we'll switch the spring on it completely out.
What's the advantage of going from a heavier to the 19-pounder that Wilson sells?
Now, it'll reduce your trigger pull quite a bit. It makes your gun a little easier to cycle. It doesn't have near as much tension on it when the slide comes back. And you shouldn't ever have any trouble with reliability of it either. As far as as long as you've got good ammo, you shouldn't have any trouble at all with it misfiring. And we just replace the spring. These springs here are still plenty strong enough. Sometimes you can go down to 15, 16 pound. Anytime you're compressing a spring like that, you need to put your safety glasses on in case it gets away from you.
Okay.
And just being careful to push it down in there. You might want to put it in a vise to hold it more solid if you need to. Now we can just start putting the gun back together. Start with the slide. Take your 80 series plunger. Now if your 80 series plunger doesn't want to travel up and down in the slide in its hole very smooth, you'll need to take it back out and remove burrs inside of it or
On the plunger itself? Or inside the hole?
Inside the hole itself.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have burrs kicked up in there. If it travels up and down smooth, then it should be just fine. lube, put it in there.
You put a little bit of lube in there to kind of.
Yeah, kind of smooth everything up. And this one here, it runs up and down real smooth. So it shouldn't have any problem with that. Okay, now we've got we can drop our trigger in.
Now that fits just like you wanted it to, right? Just
Yeah, it'll drop in, but it doesn't have any noticeable play up and down in it. You may have to go back later and remove a little bit more after you've used it some. It may, try to gall a little bit inside there.
now when the hammer falls, show us the action. What actually happens? So you pull the trigger and.
Okay, when it comes out, it'll just barely break, and your trigger screw and your trigger will stop your sear right out of engagement if it's adjusted right. And when your hammer comes down, it should just barely clear the top of the sear nose.
Uh-huh.
And when you've got that, you've got exactly what you need to get the correct over travel and stuff. Okay, now we'll get our trigger screw put in the trigger. We'll get our over travel adjusted on it. We'll have to put it all back together now.
What about lubing the hammer hooks?
Yeah, we can lube. Need to be sure and lubricate everything real good so you can tell exactly what's going on. You just want to be sure your upper 80 series part is back in there. Now, if it clears to start with, you can go start by turning your screw in a few turns, and then checking. Now I've got it adjusted too far, and you can pull the trigger, and it's adjusted so far that the sear can't even move out of the engagement. So what we need to do is back it up a few turns. Try it again. Now it's coming out of engagement now, but it's bumping the half-cock notch right there. It's actually stopping it.
The trigger pulled.
You actually see it just barely catching on it. So we'll still need to back it out. Just to slide them out. And it's still, it's not as bad as it was, but still just barely bumping it. Now it's not bumping it. Can't feel it bumping at all. And at that point, if you haven't unscrewed it too much, you can play with it back and forth to make sure everything's set right.
Now, if you unscrew it too much, what's the situation? What's it feel like?
You'll have excessive over travel. Yeah, the trigger. And this way you've got the least amount of over travel as possible with everything cut like it is. At that point, oil it up real good.
What kind of lube are you using there?
Using Ultima Lube. Just lube all the parts up with.
And you're not using too much, but you're using enough to get them all working well, right?
Right.
I like that syringe adapter. Can help you get in a small place.
Yeah, it works real good for that. And I believe we pretty much got what we need.
Thought I might mention the basic advantages of a 1911 style trigger over some of the other designs. Anytime you pull the trigger on 1911, whether it's a production gun like this or a full custom gun, basically what you've got when you pull the trigger is very, very minimal trigger movement. See, I've got a little bit of a pre-travel there that's in it just so the gun can reset, so the disconnector can reset. And basically you pull the take-up out, and then watch how much my finger moves. Very little movement there. Very little movement to my trigger finger. Where a lot of the other designs, like the Glock pistol, for example, you go to move the trigger and considerably more take-up, which the take-up is not a problem. Watch how much movement there is to my trigger finger. See how far my trigger finger went back? What happens there, that during that interval from the time that I start pressing that trigger until the time the gun actually fires and my finger stops moving, that's all time that the front sight, the muzzle of the gun can be moving. So the longer that dwell time and the more movement there is to my trigger finger, the more chance there is that muzzle moving as I'm pulling the trigger. So the crisp trigger pull on a 1911 style pistol and the minimal amount of finger movement is the key to the reason that the 1911 pistol is so easy to shoot and used by all the top competition shooters and pretty much the preferable sidearm of most of the self-defense professionals in this country. And pretty much it's the pistol they recommend at Gunsight and at Thunder Ranch and most of the top training facilities in the country.
Exactly.
The next modification that Ken and I both highly recommend is an extended thumb safety. The factory safety on production guns looks something like this pistol here. It's fairly small. And depending on your hand size, especially the larger thumbs you have, kind of easy to miss in a high-speed draw. You get a draw and you're going to have to push the safety off before you can fire the handgun. So we highly recommend an extended thumb safety that is slightly wider than normal, but not the big wide ones that the competition shooters normally put on the guns, because you don't want to take a chance of snagging on your clothing and flipping the gun off safety while you're carrying it. And frankly, there's no advantage of it being a lot wider. You notice when I go to flip the safety off here how much contact surface my thumb has on the safety. So it's really easy to flip the safety on down. And if you're one of the shooters that shoot with your thumb on top of the safety, which is preferable if you can, you've got a bigger platform to rest your thumb on also.
A lot of it's just how it feels, right?
Right. Now we're close enough right now, we can probably go ahead and just take a polishing stick and just lightly hit the front of it. Your polishing stick will remove a little bit more too, so it'll help the way it fits. So now we've got it pretty much where we need it. You can still see it's got the contact in the the full distance of it there in the middle. And at that point you've got it fit to the sear. Now what you need to do is to get it, you need to, one thing I like to do is to clean up the very front of the safety. This one here, it barely does bump the front of the plunger tube. So it's a little bit long. You don't want to take too much off of it, or you'll remove your detent that you've already got in it altogether. So we'll just go over to the file to the vise and remove just a little bit, just to clean up the front of it.
Okay, so hold on one second here, Jack.
Now we're going to clean the face of the safety off just a little bit to remove any casting marks or anything in it. I put a towel here in the vise to protect the serrations and everything on the pad of the safety. You don't want to snug it up too hard or you'll squish it. You want to stay with the angle it's already got. That pretty much Gets that cleaned up there. Now it clears the plunger tube like it should. You can put your plunger spring assembly in there and go ahead and try, see how well it works up and down. I'm going to make sure it engages the detent when it's all the way down. Probably can't pick it up with a camera, but with it all the way down, it's fully in the detent. I'll make sure you don't have it too light going up. You don't want it to accidentally kick up while you're shooting it. You don't want to have it too light going down, or while you're carrying, you might accidentally bump it off. So, especially since it's a carry gun, you want to have it, plenty heavy enough for what the purpose is. One thing sometimes you might need to do is to knock this sharp corner off of the bottom of it right here where the plunger snaps over. Just going to just lightly break the corner. And this will make it kick off just a little bit easier and make it a lot smoother. And a little bit goes a long way on this. Now, with that done, you pretty much got it fit.
What do you think about beaver tail grip safeties, Ken?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I rather like them. Initially, I started out obviously shooting pistols that had the standard configuration grip safety, and in the early days didn't know any different and shot a great deal and always had either a welt or eventually a calloused area in the web of my hand because that grip safety continued to beat it and batter it, and eventually it used to be kind of a mark of honor if you were a early IPSC competition shooter to look at the shooter's hand, and if he had a calloused, roughened area in the web of his hand, you knew he was a serious competitor because, he practiced a lot. But the end result was if you went out and did a lot of shooting on any given day, you came home with a pretty tender hand, and particularly newer shooters, neophytes, who hadn't shot much at all and their hand hadn't been toughened up, they could go out for an afternoon and shoot 100, 150 rounds and often come home with their hands literally bleeding. Yeah. Because of the sharp edges.
Especially people that had office jobs and stuff like that.
Right, people who don't work with their hands a lot. So with the advent of what we call the beaver tail grip safety, which is nothing but a wider, more rounded, smooth grip safety that wraps up a little bit, does two things. One, it protects the web of your hand. It means that the gun's much more comfortable to shoot. The other thing, other positive feature is when you're carrying the gun, as you make your draw, it allows the hand to slide right into a natural, higher grip. If you look at the position at the back of the grip safety here, where the web of your hand fits, and you look at the position of this safety, you'll notice it actually puts your hand lower on the weapon. Well, the end result of having a high-cut beaver tail grip safety is it allows you to grip the weapon higher. When you grip the gun higher, that means your hand's higher in line with the bore, and that generally translates to better recoil control. So I'm a big fan of it. One of the best features that a few years ago Bill came out with a modification to his beaver tail grip safety with this extension on the bottom. I'm one of those shooters who shoots the .45 and I keep my thumb on top of the safety. I actually use it, if you imagine, almost like a thumb rest. That's my preferable way to hold the pistol. Well, when you do that and you have a big hand, a lot of shooters fail to depress the grip safety completely, which means with their hand like this, they try to pull the trigger and the grip safety is still engaged and the gun won't fire. As a matter of fact, for ages, a lot of competitive shooters, just as a matter of fact, when they had their pistol worked on, would have the grip safety pinned in, deactivated, because they didn't want to miss it in competition. A lot of people who carried .45 for self-defense would take tape and wrap it around the gun right here to keep the grip safety permanently depressed so they wouldn't miss it in a life and death encounter. We all know deactivating a grip safety in today's liability-prone society is probably a pretty questionable practice. One of the things that Bill did, which I think is an excellent feature, is he's built up, actually, when he had the safeties manufactured, increased the surface, the bottom of the grip safety, so even somebody like me with a large hand who normally doesn't depress the grip safety, there's now enough material here that my hand makes contact and it's depressed, and I always fire the weapon without any difficulty. So I think it's a real positive feature. Since Bill's introduced his, a number of other manufacturers in the market have copied his, but his is the one that I continue to use. I think it's an exquisite design, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to not pick it for your pistol, both for the comfort factor and for the positive effect of depressing the grip safety.
Your grip safety's got spring tension on it, trying to keep it pushed down all the time. And this has got to slide out from under.
So that's where it's hanging up.
That's what's keeping it from coming up. It's just a little bit rough. You take your polishing stick. Just hit it a few strokes there, and
I guess it's important that that's smooth so it doesn't get caught on the little...
right. You want it to operate as smooth as possible. At the same time, you don't want to remove too much off of it to limit your engagement on it. Now you've got it. Release the trigger. It's coming, sliding right out from under, nice and smooth. Your safety goes down. Works free.
It has a little click there, but will that wear away?
It may be. Might check it. Take a little bit more off that leg just to be on the safe side. Put a little oil in it.
Looks like it's working a little better.
Yeah. Okay, now we've got our part in there and everything seems to be working like it should. The main thing to look for is make sure it travels up and down smooth, no hitches whatsoever.
What motion would that be?
Just the up and down, you know,
That's with the hammer drop?
just the swing of it. Yeah, with the hammer fully cocked, you know, you need to check it, and with the hammer down, you need to check it. That'll let you know too if your hammer might be rubbing on the grip safety. If you know if it was hanging up, that might be what it is. You also want to make sure with the hammer cocked on it, it's got plenty of travel right there before it breaks. And this one runs, you know, nearly all the way down before it'll break. Right. And you want to make sure with keeping your trigger pushed in that, you know, you can tell actually how much travel you've got by that. Let you know how far it's going down. You want to make sure your trigger slides out from underneath it smooth, you know, no hang-ups or anything. And you know, make sure it doesn't block the leg inside. Make sure it's not too thick and hitting your trigger parts in there, because it may be rubbing up against it just enough to put creep into your gun that you might not have had before. You know, that's a lot of times that's what the problem is. You also want to make sure that you've got it back far enough that you don't have any, that you're getting plenty enough trigger travel out of. You don't want to be hitting, you know, the half cock or anything like that. And if it's not getting enough travel, it'll act like a trigger it'll actually act like a trigger stop. It'll just completely stop your trigger before it gets back as far as it should be. And if it does, all you need to do is move this surface right here, move it back to where you've got more travel between your trigger and your grip safety, back and forth. And with everything in there, and after you do all the safety checks, you're pretty much finished with it.
I might mention also, one of the things we talked about safeties, extended safeties. This particular pistol of mine is fitted with an ambidextrous safety. And the only thing I will tell you, if you're a left-hander, clearly the ambidextrous safety is a must. This original ambi safety design was first pioneered and marketed by the great Armand Swenson, one of the earliest custom pistolsmiths to work on a 1911 pistol. And it's become very popular. A lot of people equip their guns with them. If you're a left-hander, it's an obvious thing you want. It's something you absolutely want on your gun. If you're not a right-hander, it may be something you might like to have. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a real big fan of them because to me it's another snag point. It's just something else, particularly when the weapon's worn on the strong side of your body. It's just something else to catch on your clothing or to be brushed off by your seat belt. Or it's just, to me, not necessary. If you want it, fine. But candidly, you don't need it unless you're a left-hand shooter. But they're available. Bill markets one. It's a very easy accessory to fit to your weapon. We strongly recommend that it be fitted by a competent pistolsmith because it does involve mating to some sear surfaces. Because remember, the process is you want the safety when it's on to prevent the weapon from firing. So it needs to be installed by somebody that knows what they're doing.
Before you do put the safety in, you need to remember to shorten your hammer pins and your sear pin both. These have already been shortened. You want to shorten where they're at least flush or maybe just barely below flush, like these are.
So you're shortening just by grinding them down a little bit? Right,
they're just dome shaped to start with, and they won't work. You can't get this side to fit all the way up against the frame unless you cut them down.
Let's see it on the other frame then.
In this frame here, you can see how far they stick up.
So you'd want to take them out of the gun.
Right, take them out of the gun, and just you want to go slow because it's easy to take off too much, and they won't look good if you take off too much of it.
You cut those.
You cut your pins down. You'd have to do that. Really, that should be the first thing you do before you try to fit it, because when you try to fit it to the sear, you need to make sure and have both sides in there. And before you do that, you've got to shorten your pins.
Right.
And other than that, it's basically the same way as fitting any safety.
We'll pop them together real quick before I show
Okay.
And working with your left thumb up your lefty.
If you're left-handed, you just work it up and down like that. Both sides should fit, right up against the frame pretty close. You want to make sure with the grip safety in there, you want to be sure you've got, good movement with your safety. You don't want to have it binding up on anything. You may have to even polish these legs right here to make sure they meet up just like they should. And if you're going to fit a grip safety to it, you need to fit your grip safety with the safety you're going to put on it. And then once you get that done, you should never have to worry about that part again.
So if you have an ambidextrous safety on your gun and a high grip beaver tail, I would definitely recommend that you really try to use Ken's grip, where you use the thumb safety pad as a resting place for your thumb and shoot with your thumb on top of the safety.
Talking about the length and dimension difference in the 1911 pistol, if you remember, the real early original 1911 pistol had a long trigger. And then right after the First World War, when the U.S. government looked at the 1911 pistol and said there's some changes we'd like to make, among the things they did, they shortened the trigger up. Here is a 1911 A1. And if you notice the difference in the length of, say, for example, the length of the trigger on my pistol and the length of the one on this one, it's much shorter. And the theory was that for those shooters that have real small hands, it made it easier for their finger to get to the trigger. And this practice has been continued by a lot of the commercial manufacturers of the 1911 pistol. This commercial out-of-the-box Colt also has what we call a short trigger. For most shooters, my experience has been, whether their hands are small or their hands are large, I think most shooters do better with a long trigger. Because even people with small hands generally end up jamming too much of the finger inside the trigger guard. And instead of pulling the trigger straight to the rear, they end up milking the gun sideways. And I found, only on very rare occasions, I found anybody that probably wasn't better off with a little longer trigger. I've got a fairly good sized hand. I wear about size 11 gloves. And for me, shooting a pistol with a short trigger is a bit of a hassle. As a matter of fact, I will sometimes, shooting a short trigger, have my finger and I'll actually be pulling against the side of the frame. I'm trying to pull the trigger, and I'm actually pulling against the frame of the gun. So for me, and I think most shooters, the longer trigger is probably a more advantageous thing to have. One of the ones that Bill offers, which is the one I currently use in my weapons, is a long aluminum one, which makes it nice and light. You don't have what we call a lot of backlash. And his even have these sexy little 3 holes drilled in them, which makes for a very distinctive look, but also lightens the trigger again. It makes sure that when the trigger does cycle, it springs back quickly, resets for the next shot.
From a gunsmithing standpoint, what that really does for us is enables us to adjust the trigger return tension considerably less, because the trigger weighs less, so it takes less tension to return and reset. So there's not the aluminum trigger is not just a cosmetic thing. It's a very functional part of the trigger action of the gun. It's like Colt. You know, they came out with a Gold Cup, and they put a long trigger in it, but it was a wide steel trigger, which weighs 2 or 3 times more than a standard steel factory trigger like in this gun. That just compounded the problem. With a long, heavy trigger like that, it takes a tremendous amount of trigger return tension to keep that trigger forward, so we won't get what we call trigger bounce, where the trigger under recoil actually bounces back and trips the sear, makes the hammer fall to half cock, just from the sheer weight of the trigger bouncing, you know, from the recoil action. Especially when you go to a chamber the first round to load a gun. If you have your slide locked back and drop the slide to chamber around, the actual bounce of the trigger will actually bounce back, hit the sear, trip the sear, and let it drop the hammer to half cock, just from the weight of the trigger. Even though the sear and hammer engagement is perfectly safe and the sear tension is perfectly safe, and you put an aluminum trigger in there, and that totally eliminates that problem, because the trigger is so light that it doesn't have enough inertia to bounce the rear and trip the sear.
You know, and another thing we can talk about, which I think is interesting, if you look, once again, the original 1911 pistol had what we call a flat mainspring housing. And when they modified the gun to 1911A1 configuration, they went to an arched. And the theory was that for most people, when they pointed a weapon with a flat mainspring housing, it allowed them to point the weapon low. So they put an arch on here, this arch configuration, and the theory was that that would cause people to elevate the muzzle. So if you look at this, is a GI 1911A1 pistol with an arched mainspring housing. Here's a current or recently factory Colt pistol, and it still has the arched mainspring housing. But again, what I find, most shooters actually do better and find that their performance is more uniform with the flat mainspring housing. So both Bill and I, again, share preference for the flat mainspring housing. In my early days of shooting, I had most of my guns, or when I had a gun, I had to have an arched mainspring housing. When I made the changeover, I found that in reality, I did better. It seemed like I had a better grip on the weapon, and the gun aligned and indexed better. So I'm a firm believer in a flat mainspring housing. Some of the newer pistols coming out now, some of the newer generation handguns on the market are now giving you an option or now offer a flat mainspring housing. But the key issue is about it, and one of the features that Bill offers is not just a flat mainspring housing, but one that's nicely checkered. Because if there's one surface on the pistol when you grab it, particularly when your hands are sweaty, or oily, or God forbid, bloody, it's hard to hold down onto the weapon. So one area that we really want to address is the mainspring housing, because that's what's going to be actually pressed into the heel of your hand where you get the firm grip. So that nicely checkered, and this is checkered, I'm going to guess, Bill, it's about 20 line per inch checkering on that, yes, approximately. Good and sharp, good and abrasive, and you want your hand to dig in. The other thing which Bill and I both agree on is, since you grab the gun, you want to make sure that you have a good firm grip and the pistol won't slip. And everybody has favorites as far as stock configurations. Some people like smooth wood, some people like smooth ivory, some people like the Pockmeyer type rubber neoprene sticky grips. I prefer a good checkered stock panel. Because once again, under stress, when your hands are slippery and you're under, or your hands can be in real cold weather, and those of you who've worked without gloves in cold weather, you know how your grip can suffer. I'm a firm believer that your stock panels should be checkered, nice checkered wood or a composite, so that when you grab that weapon, you've got a firm, solid grip on the weapon, and it's not going to be slippery and slip and move in your hand. So I'm a real fan of the checkered flat mainspring housing. The pistol I have here has a checkered front strap, and that's a nice option. But believe me, it's not something you have to have. I like nice guns, and that nice checkered front strap's a nice assist. But candidly, I can say for decades, I shot a smooth front strap, service grade pistol, and you know what, I did just fine. I just didn't know that the checkering would be a little bit better. Every once in a while, I still teach and still use standard configuration gun. To be honest with you, I haven't noticed much problems with my shooting. So, realistically, you may want a checkered front strap pistol, but it adds expense to your gun. It's not a necessity. But I do believe nice checkered stock panels that give you some adhesion, and I really like the checkered mainspring housing being a means of making sure I've got a good, firm grip on the pistol. You got any thoughts on that, Bill?
I agree with you 100%. As you said, we both have a preference for flat housings, and you know we manufacture and sell both flat and arch housings, and we probably sell 9 flat housings to every 1 arched housing. So we're not the only ones that kind of agree that the flat housing is the way to go, especially for people with small hands. You know, it makes a big difference for women shooters and people with short fingers and small hands, that sort of thing. And I've found the flat housing and the long trigger to be the optimum setup for me.
You may wish simply to upgrade your gun so it actually feels like a real manly gun. You may want to purchase an aftermarket replacement mainspring housing, and the ones that Bill offers, both in the arched and the flat checkered, are very good quality and really complement a pistol that's come from the factory with a plastic mainspring housing.
Unlike most people that make mainspring housings, we don't use a casting on that part. We actually machine the mainspring housing out of a solid piece of bar stock and then machine cut the checkering on it. So it's really the quality of a part that was made, you know, originally back in 1911 on the guns, where everything on the gun was fully machined. It's that quality of a part. We try to think we hold the tolerance a little bit tighter than the old GI stuff, though, so they fit consistently. I think that's pretty well covered what Ken and I agree that you have to do to these guns. And we haven't really touched on accuracy, but I have found in my personal experience that accuracy-wise, the vast majority of the production 1911s on the market shoot well enough for self-defense purposes.
Yeah, we're going to test the difference between a stock Springfield and a stock 1996 A2, the accuracy difference between the two. You've just got 3 positioners here. You just unscrew these, and this panel comes out, and it's got another panel with rubber molding inside of it. And you take the grips off your gun and place it in there, and it's got relief cuts for the grip screw bushings. And the panels just slide together, and you just tighten these down in the order of A, B, C, and screw them down as tight as you can get them. And shoot a couple magazines through it just to kind of seat it in and tighten it as you shoot those few magazines. And after about 3 magazines, it'll get seated in, and then from there you just shoot your group.
All right. And what kind of yardage are we going to work with?
We've measured off 25 yards to shoot the groups at.
Okay, let me see the target you're going to use. And this is a target that everybody gets with their gun, right?
Yeah, this is the target we use at the gun shop. It's just a black square. All it is, just something to aim at.
And then you, when you test a gun that you build and send out, customers get to get this target, right?
Yeah, we have all the gunsmiths sign it and put the customer's name and the serial number and the job number of the gun. And then we pass it around the shop, and everybody that worked on the gun signs it, you know, just something for the customer to have. And we put the load that it was shot with on the target also.
Well, let's go put a target down right here. Now you're at 25 yards. Do you have a reason to test at 25 yards?
That's just kind of a standard yardage to test them at.
Okay. At the shop, you're the shop manager, right? So you're the guy who kind of is in charge of the entire custom shop.
Yeah, I try to anyway. Okay, we're going to shoot 5 shots to see what the group size is. And we're shooting a 200 grain semi-wad cutter is what bullet we'll be shooting. Okay, that's the 5 there.
Okay. And which gun was this?
That's the 1996 A2.
And that's not a bad-looking group, huh?
No, not too bad.
So you figure that's probably an inch or so.
Yeah, about an inch, and that's with a drop-in barrel too. So
This gun has no real true gunsmithing or custom work done to it, does it?
no, we build these guns pretty quick, and we just mostly concentrate on the function of them, as far as the extractor work and the barrel throat and the feed ramp, and just make them run perfect. But as far as accuracy, that's not what we're really trying to make them tack drivers. We're just trying to make them a good carry gun.
Right. And they seem to be fairly accurate right
Yeah.
out of the box.
Okay, now we got a stock Springfield that hasn't had anything done to it, that we're going to shoot at the same distance of 25 yards, shooting the same ammo, the 230 grain Winchester, or semi-wide cutters, and we're just going to shoot a 5-shot group with the same distance. Okay, that's 5 shots there, finally.
All right, we're going to look at that. We're going to check them out.
Yeah, we're going to see what happens.
What kind of accuracy you usually see off the factory guns?
This one's probably about average. Maybe, yeah, it's pretty close to about average. That's about average for about any stock gun there. Maybe a little bit better than average.
Like we've been talking all week here, the average distance of an encounter is normally about 7 yards, with a lot of them 3 and 5 yards, and a long shot being about 15 yards. This old, well, not old, but a new Series 70 gun that hasn't been used yet is typical of most of your production guns. It's relatively loose, but there's no doubt in my mind that we could go to the range of this gun, and at 15 yards, this gun would shoot under 2 inches at 15 yards. There's no doubt in my mind that it would, and most of them will. And unless your gun is just one of that just absolutely just will not group, that's totally adequate. Actually, don't you agree, Ken?
Absolutely. Those of us that shoot a lot, we practice, we teach, we're competitive shooters. Most of us like to have a weapon that we feel gives us the absolute edge in accuracy. And for that reason, one of the things we talk about between something you really want to have done to your gun versus something, say, you really need. We know the needed items are a reliable pistol, a good clean trigger, good high visibility sights. Probably, Bill and I both now, we're at the point where we like that beaver tail grip safe, to the point we actually consider that a need item.
And I also consider the extended thumb safety personally a need item.
Right. But when you're starting about things you want, you may very well say to yourself, I want my pistol to be accurized. And that term causes a lot of eyebrows to go up. People say, well, accurized pistols are evil. And I remember the classic one when I got involved in this business a couple decades ago. People, as soon as you said my pistol's been accurized, first thing was, well, then your gun's not reliable. Well, back in the era of NRA bullseye guns, the 1911 guns that were shot at Camp Perry, in those eras, the gunsmiths who worked on the guns made them so incredibly tight to get every edge of accuracy. Often the guns weren't reliable. But remember, when you're shooting an NRA bullseye match, if your gun malfunctioned, you just stopped and raised your hand, called for an alibi, and got a reshoot. Well, when we started the early days of practical pistol shooting, combat pistol shooting, there's no alibis. If your pistol doesn't work, you just have to eat the misses. On the street, the option isn't even that nice. If you don't just have to eat the misses, you may have to eat the results of your own misdeeds. So one thing that's happened, and this is one of the most dramatic changes about the custom .45 business in the last couple decades, is the fact people like Bill have mastered the art of customizing the pistols, including accuracy jobs, and maintaining the degree of reliability that you'd expect to get from a standard, unadjusted, unfitted pistol. To the point where this pistol I've got, which has had incredible amount of rounds through it, and right now it's pretty dirty. It was dirty before I came out here. We've shot it all week. Last night I was getting ready to clean it, and I thought, well, it's tired. I'm tired, it's late, it's hot. I just put a little bit more lube on it, and I assure you it'll run again. When people ask me about how reliable is your pistol, I'm perfectly confident I can go out and shoot 500 rounds through this gun without cleaning it, and it's just as reliable as if it has been cleaned. That's how far this art has come.
Little bit at a time.
Just a little bit at a time until you get to where you want to be. So we're going to squeeze this one just a little bit more. And
How much pressure are you applying to that device when you go ahead?
not a whole lot. You know, you just kind of have to snug up on it. This is one of those things that it sure helps to have a lot of practice.
Yeah, and you're kind of eyeballing it as you go?
Mm-hmm. Just basically looking through there to make sure that everything is sitting square, or that nothing slips or falls, you know, springs out of the vise. That's went on there just about perfect. Okay, now what you're looking for is how much movement you have in the rear portion. Okay, at this point we have none, but it's not too tight, so that all we have to do is that when we take the slide off is a couple of file strokes inside, and that actually smooths up the surface inside the frame at the same time that you get to the desired tightness you want.
The technique of fitting the slides to the frame has been perfected to the point where, and people, by the way, say to me, well, how important is slide to frame fit? You know, the guy picks up a pistol like this one and rattles it and says, well, that gun can't be accurate, when Bill and I both know that it's quite accurate. Fitting the slide to frame, we're closing up the tolerances. You're not going to get as much play, but it's going to be adjusted to the point where the play is acceptable, so that even though the gun may be dirty, it's still going to run. Barrel fit is really the key. And that art has been perfected to the point not only fitting the barrel to the lugs and to the slide stop pin, but also the perfection of fitting the bushing, to the point now where the barrels like Bill offer provide not only the uniformity in the barrel dimension of the chamber, but also the way they're fitted to the handgun, results in pistols that typically, almost with exception probably of these two production guns, you can take any of his pistols here on the table, and I assure you, you take them out and shoot them. I'm not a real good pistol shot, but even I, at 25 yards on a good day, can shoot a 2.5, 3-inch group, and that's exquisite. Put it in a machine rest, and the gun will probably shoot a 1-inch group.
Of course, that's going to make some sharp corners. We'll knock them off, and we'll take our wide pillar file, the fine cut. Just a little bevel on those. Main reason for doing this is to be sure that whenever you take your frame and your barrel just drops down in here, a lot of times the corners and stuff aren't clean in the frame, so you just kind of break the sharp edge toward it to be sure and drop down and scoot back in the frame as far as they're supposed to.
Gunfights aren't won by pistols that shoot 1-inch groups. It's nice, it makes you feel good. You say, my gun's more accurate than your gun, but in reality that's not even an issue. The issue is that the gun's reliable, and it'll put bullets where you point it. But it's a nice thing to have your gun accurized? Absolutely. If you shoot a lot, and here's a definition, Bill and I both have one thing in common, we shoot a lot of rounds. A gun that's accurized, that has fitted parts, will last a long time. It will retain its accuracy a long time. I've got a couple pistols that I've had and shot for years. In fact, I've got a pistol that Bill Wilson built for me back in 1980. And that gun has had an incredible amount of rounds for it. I even use it now as a loaner. When I'm traveling, I'm teaching in class and somebody's got a gun that doesn't work or is broken or they forgot one or they don't have enough ammo, I've loaned that pistol out. I've went on trips where I've had to supply weapons to colleagues, whether it be protective work or whatever, and I've loaned that gun out. It has been shot almost to death. It's a terrible looking gun. But you know what? Today, if you took that gun out and shot it, it'll still shoot handheld 2.5-inch groups at 25 yards all day long. And I don't know what it'll do in the machine rest, but I'm sure it'll do just fine. And candidly, the gun's probably got well over 50,000 rounds of ammo through it. So it's not, if you shoot a lot, it's a valid approach. If you're a person who only shoots maybe 500 rounds a year, it's questionable whether or not you need to spend the money on an accurized, hard-fit pistol.
Yeah, basically, the things we've recommended here, total reliability, number 1, high visibility sights, number 2, a good trigger action, number 3, are the things that you have to do to the guns. I mean, absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason to own a 1911 that doesn't have, you know, total reliability, a decent trigger, and decent sights. I mean, I have no need for one of them that doesn't have that. Ken and I both prefer an extended thumb safety, and we prefer the beaver tail. Maybe we're just getting old and soft or something.
That could be it.
Another thing that we haven't mentioned is beveling the magazine well a bit. The bottom edge of the magazine well, as it comes from the factory, or the original 1911 style guns, is just a square edge on the bottom. Under a stress situation, if the edges are beveled a little bit, it makes it easier to insert the magazine. You know, you'd have to be less exact on how you hit the magazine well to get the magazine to go in there.
We're going to run this mill in here and see if we can get some of this material out. Okay, we just milled that out to get a lot of the material out of the way. Like I said, later we're going to go in there with the Dremel tool, get our mainspring housing in. We're going to just contour this in so it all flows into the mag well and get rid of any sharp edges that might help fast reloads. And this is normally what we do also with the mag well on, which we call a super butt or super funnel on a lot of our guns, especially the super grade gets that. So we get this off of here, we'll be putting a mainspring housing in it and getting it in the vise and starting to take the Dremel tool and contour that around all the edges and get it looking a lot better.
So that's another very worthwhile addition to it. The checkered mainspring housing on the back and the checkered stocks to get a good firing grip are all very worthwhile. And basically, this new 1996 A2 pistol that we just came out with features all these different things, plus a match barrel properly installed in it to make the gun shoot extremely well, and a commander hammer. Encompasses everything that you have to have done on a gun, and frankly, very few frills that you don't have to have. Ken and I both have our personal handguns laid out here, and if you look at my personal gun as compared to this 96 A2, you notice the only difference basically is I have the front strap checkered on it. I'm a pretty big fan of checkered front strap, and Ken's has a checkered front strap, and he has ambi safety, of which, as he's mentioned, he could live with or without. So basically, the people that are professionals in this industry and in defensive training like Ken are all basically in agreement of what it takes to make the gun right. And anything past the things we've discussed here are mostly cosmetics. A lot of people like the top of the slide serrated, the back of the slide checkered, you know, custom two-tone finishes, you know, different things like that, which are all great and adds, you know, a certain amount of pride of ownership to the gun. And let's face it, you know, if there wasn't pride of ownership, you know, everybody would drive a white Volkswagen, you know, I mean.
And carry a Glock.
And carry a Glock, you know, so, you know.
And a Glock's a great pistol. I mean, please don't misread that. It is a very good pistol.
It's a very good tool.
It's an excellent tool, but it's the only pistol I know that comes out of the box without pride of ownership. I don't care who you are, it's an ugly gun. It works very well, and for a lot of people it's a superb tool, but it's hard to take a Glock out and show it to your friends and say, look at this. I mean, you take the Glock and pass that thing over here, Bill, and we've got a plastic frame, a black Parkerized, rather bland looking slide, quite honestly ugly lines, and you compare it, say, to a classic nice 1911 pistol, and it's pretty hard to say that this is prettier than this. But don't get me wrong, it's a good pistol. It's just, like I say, it doesn't cause you to have quite the appreciation of aesthetics that you would with a 1911.
A lot of the states now are passing concealed carry laws. I think last I heard about 38 states or something like that had concealed carry laws. So more and more people are carrying handguns on a day-to-day basis and for long periods of time. On the 1911 style pistol, one of the things that has to be done if you're going to carry the gun all the time is to bevel all the sharp edges. Here's a production Colt. You'll notice along the front of the slide, along the front of the dust cover here, the sights, there's lots of sharp edges on this gun. You actually need all the edges, like the muzzle of the gun, the muzzle of the front of the dust cover, back edge of the slide, your sights. You need to have everything dehorned, or a carry bevel, as some people call it, deburred, whatever you want to call it. All these edges sharp edges have to be removed, so as you're handling this gun, you're carrying it, it doesn't tear the linings out of your jackets. Cut the inside of your arm if you brush your arm against the side of the gun when you're carrying it. And you have to wipe a smokestack out. The sights don't rip your hand wide open. Ken and I both agree it's a very important thing for us to go ahead and have all the sharp edges removed on any gun that you're actually going to use as a self-defense tool.
Yeah, and to the point where, and it's a fairly exacting art. I mean, a lot of people say, well, you just sit down with a file and start working on it. Well, you can obviously ruin a gun. It takes a craftsman who really understands what he's doing to very carefully break, or what the term used to be, melt the edges, and know which ones need to be dealt with. There's some on this gun that you don't have to worry about it. Take all those surfaces where your hand's normally going to be in contact, or where your clothing might rub, and make sure just very carefully those edges are radiused enough so that you don't have a sharp snag point. More and more people are demanding this. Unfortunately, the new production guns, because most of the manufacturing processes now are using CNC machinery. If you pick up a new production Colt, or even worse, the Springfield Armory pistols, you'll find the sharp edges on them are almost appalling. They were not only hard on your hands, but they'll certainly rip up your clothing if you carry the weapon concealed. So regardless if you purchase either one of those guns, one of the things you should include in your requirements of having the gun modified would be what we call a bevel package, or a dehorning of the gun, to ensure that you can run your hand over it. And a simple system is simply pick up the pistol and do that. Run your hand over the pistol. And if you don't feel any sharp snag or sharp edges, then you're probably okay. But wherever you feel places you go, yeah, that's not very comfortable, then you're going to want to have that addressed.
Let's discuss finishes. Again, like I was mentioning about the dehorning and deburring of the gun, more and more people are carrying these guns on a daily basis, carrying them all day long, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. So perspiration and different things have a big effect on these guns if you carry it all day long. What do you recommend in finishes?
Well, unlike you, I've kind of went around and tried them all. I started off, the original 45 I carried was one like this that had Parkerizing. Now, Parkerizing is not very pretty. It's kind of a dull gray, or in this case, the Parkerizing on my current pistol is a little bit darker black.
Yeah, this is a manganese phosphate, and that's, I think, zinc.
Zinc
That's what
phosphate.
the original stuff is there.
But quite honestly, it's a good finish. It worked quite well. Now, Parkerizing will wear off, and of course the metal underneath it when it's exposed will rust. But everybody likes a nice pretty blued gun, and I am no exception. A blued pistol is probably still one of the most attractive things you can own. And if you live in the American Southwest where the humidity is very low, it may be an excellent weapon to carry. If you live in the Midwest or in the Southeast like Bill and I do, where particularly in the summer months the humidity is very high, it's warm, you perspire heavily. Remember, we're not about carrying a gun 8 or 10 hours a day. Blued guns will quickly, if you carry them in that environment, generally end up with what we call GI gold, which is a nice way of saying rust on them. So while blued guns are attractive, I'm not much a fan of them because, to me, remember, this is basically a utility item. So I preferably have two finishes that I really like now of applied finishes. One is parkerizing. It's still one of the best. And this gun I'm using right now happens to be a parkerized one that Bill did build up for me a couple years ago, and it's worn quite well. The parkerizing he's using has been very serviceable. Probably my pick, if I had to choose one good utilitarian finish to be applied to carbon steel, it's the polymer finish, and the one I like and the one I'm absolutely the most impressed with is the black tea, and it's a finish available from Bill's shop here in Arkansas, and it's done by Birdsong and Associates. I've got my duty pistol, the gun I carry for duty is done in black tea. I've had it for about 3 or 4 years. The gun's been subjected to an incredible amount of use. And the nice thing about the black tea, besides the fact that it does produce a very attractive pistol, is you can be out in a real hot, humid day, out in the rain, sweating on your gun, and you don't have to worry about perspiration. To me, that's a real virtue. Yeah. It's a more expensive finish, but if I had to pick one finish that I would want to put on the gun I carry, an applied finish, I think this black tea would be my pick. There's advantages to stainless steel, and people often say about hard chrome. Is hard chrome a good finish? It's a good finish, but the one virtue both of those finishes have is their color, and they're bright. And let's say, for example, a black gun will attract a lot less tension. If your jacket should blow open in the wind, or your weapon should be exposed, if you've got a hard chrome pistol or a stainless pistol, people are going to see it quicker. It's going to attract more attention.
And hard chrome, a lot of people have this feeling that hard chrome is rust-proof and rust-resistant, which is a big fallacy. We worked with hard chrome through the years. We built a lot of competition guns and hard chrome the entire gun or hard chrome the bottom half of the gun. And what was real apparent to us quickly was the fact that it is probably the most wear-resistant finish you can put on a gun. It's got a Rockwell of like 70 on the C scale, something like that. And it will extend the life of a competition pistol where these people shoot 100,000 rounds through the gun before they retire it. But it has very little effect on corrosion resistance. It does not withstand perspiration very well at all. The parkerizing that Ken has on his gun and the black tea that I've got on my gun both do much, much better as far as resisting rust and corrosion. So while the hard chrome is something that I think you should look at for a competition gun when you're trying to get maximum wear as far as number of rounds downrange out of your gun, hard chrome is a very desirable finish. But for the purposes that we've been discussing this week, for a carry gun, for self-defense purposes, I'm in total agreement with Ken. Good black parkerized or the black tea finish is my preference in finishes also. I'd like to show you one of our 1996 A2 pistols. This is a new production pistol that Wilson Combat is just introducing on the market. We've been involved in customizing pistols for the last 18 years, normally on Colt or Springfield Armory components, sometimes on Caspian components. And, while they're all very good components, and we built some very nice pistols on those components, we finally decided to make our own entire pistol. And we've basically tried to use the information that we've learned over the 18 years working on all these other pistols and tried to correct all the deficiencies that we've ran across in all these other production guns to try to produce a production pistol that we feel is superior to some of our competition. Ken, what do you, I know you haven't had a chance to really look at one of these yet, what do you think of the gun overall? And we've already pretty much agreed that the options are what we like on the gun.
Now, Bill, this gun is your slide and your frame components. This is not like a Colt or Springfield's. This is yours.
They're ours, and they're fully machined from forgings. They're not. It's not a cast frame like a lot of people use.
And I trust that basically, based upon the experiences you have, you're having these components made to the specifications that you want as far as the fit and the desirable features on them.
Yeah, we're holding a lot tighter tolerance than what most production 1911s on the market are. Like, for example, one of the first things people do when they pick up a slide, just like you did, they wiggle the slide. That's kind of a test.
A real good fit.
How good is the slide fit? It's kind of a test of how good a gun is.
That's exceptional.
We're specifying basically the interference fit between the slide and the frame to be 0 to about 3.5 thousandths is the tolerance we're trying to hold. the slides and frames are fully machined out of a forging on modern CNC Haas equipment. So there's not much else you can do to enhance quality other than the specifications that you give to the machinists that manufacture the product. And we're holding the tightest manufacturing tolerances as far as what our prints call for of anybody in the industry. We're having to charge a little bit extra for that, but we feel like there's a market out there for a production gun right out of the box that's made, you know, ready to go. I mean, it's, you know, that you're not going to have to buy this gun, then you're going to have to send it to a gunsmith that specializes in 1911s and wait for him to customize it to your specifications. Try to make a good fighting tool right out of the box.
Well, looking at this and comparing it to the gun that I'm using, which is a custom pistol built for me a few years ago by you, and this is built on Caspian sliding frame. This thing is very similar. One of the things I noticed, of course, is it's pretty well outfitted with the accessories that you and I both agree upon. It's got good high profile fixed sights, dovetail front. The advantage of the pinch check grooves up here, or the front grasping grooves, it allows you, even when you're wearing gloves or your hands are wet and slippery with perspiration, to reach up and grab the slide and check. So I think that's a good feature, and of course it's very attractive. I noticed the grasping grooves both on the rear of the slide and the front are very reminiscent of the original Colt National Match configuration grooves, and they actually give you a better gripping surface, and actually I think they're much more attractive than the conventional old style serrations that were on the original guns. These can sometimes, when your hands are wet and slippery, can be hard to hold on to. I see that it's got a Wilson barrel in it. Is that one of your stainless steel match grade barrels in this pistol?
Yeah, what we've done, this is the bore on this barrel is done just right along with a standard production of all of our match grade barrels. There's no dimensional or quality difference in the chamber, the bore of the barrel. The only difference is we're manufacturing the slides and frames to such tight tolerances, repeatable tolerances, that we're able to machine an exterior dimension on the barrel to we're basically able to go in the gun, lock up tightly without any hand fitting, and where they will zero with the same sight sets on every gun. So basically we got a deal where we just plug the barrel in, it locks up tight. What's your opinion of the lockup on that
Boy,
particular
it's
gun?
dead solid. That's impressive.
And we put the same sight height on all of them, and so basically when we go to zero the guns during test fire, all we got to do is drift the sights from side to side to get the windage right, and so the consumer receives a pistol that's already zeroed, ready to go.
Now, is the Extractor one of your?
It's one of our bulletproof extractor. We're using the bulletproof line of products, and what I mean by bulletproof, we sell a limited line of product, firing pin stop, firing pin, extractor, slide stop, hammer, you know, parts that, most of these parts are the parts that are most commonly broken on a 1911 pistol. And so we've manufactured these bulletproof parts out of the absolute best material for the purpose that we can find. Real careful certified heat treat and stress relieve on the parts. And we sell them with basically a lifetime warranty. I mean, if you put a bulletproof part in your gun and it breaks, we'll give you another one, you know, no questions asked.
Good.
And so we're using the bulletproof parts in this gun, and the extractor is one of the bulletproof parts. And when we do install the extractor, we're actually adjusting the tension where it has the proper tension on the extractor, so it holds the loaded round up against the breech face. We get proper extraction and ejection.
Are you setting the trigger pulls on this particular pistol to any particular range? Are you trying to?
We're doing kind of a limited trigger job on these guns. Since it's a production gun, I mean, we cannot afford to put the time to do a hand-fit trigger like one of these guns has on it, and you know, that perfect, you know, pristine, crisp 3-pound let-off. What we're doing, we're giving these guns a crisp let-off in somewhere in the 3.5 to 4.5 pound range. That's our target, is 3.5 to 4.5 pound range.
This one seems to have, and I'm just going to guess, but it's got a nice crisp, feels to me between 4.5 pound trigger, which is just fine for what we're talking about. I see it's also got your excellent beaver tail grip safety that we both agree is a pretty desirable item to have. Flat checkered mainspring housing. No, the magazine well is beveled. Now, is that the standard production?
Standard production.
That's good. And you've got your long match trigger on it, which gives us that excellent trigger purchase and position. And of course, this gun is beautifully finished in blue. Is there going to be any other finishes available besides the blue?
We offer the gun in a blue finish with the bottom of the gun, the frame is a glass bead blue. The top is a polished side, glass bead top to kind of give a little contrast to it, which we think is a very attractive finish. And also we do the gun in a black parkerized finish or black phosphate finish.
There you are.
Which for a using gun, for an
actual gun you carry,
yeah,
probably the way.
The parkerizing is superior to the blue. Well, the guns are identical other than finish, and as you can see here, hold that one up again. Cosmetically, I think we'll both agree this is a much prettier gun
right.
than that gun. But as a functioning defensive tool, that's a better defensive gun.
I notice it also, of course, has your speed safety, the one we both agree is a nice, practical speed safety. And the stocks on them are very attractive. I'm going to guess these are not something you go buy in a store. These must be a semi-custom stock that you're providing with these guns?
Yeah, what we're doing, the custom stocks we put on most of our full-blown custom shop pistols have the raised diamond pattern.
The 1911 pattern stock.
The original 1911 pattern stock that a lot of people really like. Well, in the manufacture of stocks, leaving these raised diamonds uncheckered is really kind of a pain in the butt,
Yeah.
So we're able to offer basically the same quality of stock, that's the same sharp checkering. One last item, we go ahead and we put an 8-round Wilson Rogers magazine in every gun. That's the magazine that comes with it, and we ship it in a nylon pistol rug that you can actually take to the range and use it at the range rather than a plastic box you'll probably wonder what to do with after you get home with it. And a couple of years ago I did a full-color maintenance manual on the 1911s, kind of putting everything that I've learned through all those years about how to adjust and maintain the 1911 style pistol and what you need to watch for to make sure you're not about to have a problem on your carry gun. And we include that manual in with each gun also.
Good. Can you tell us the background behind the selection of 1996 A2?
Well, the 1996 obviously is because of the year. I mean, we just developed this product in 1996. The A2 configuration, we are considering the features that we have on this gun.
The improvements and the upgrades.
The beaver tail, the extended thumb safety, the high visibility sights, all the things we discussed here today. That's the A2 configuration of the 1911 style pistol. The suggested retail price of these guns, either in blue or parkerized, it doesn't make any difference, is $12.95, and that includes the federal excise tax.
The difference between the gun like this and this one that sells for $12.95, what the price range does a pistol like this sell from your shop?
Well, a gun like this, it's went all the way through our full custom shop and had master pistol smiths fit every little part on it as precisely as humanly possible, and try to remove every cosmetic blemish that we can before putting the black tea finish on there. That gun is about a $2,200 gun.
Wow.
So it's almost $1,000 difference in the guns. But
so this is actually a pretty good bargain.
We think it's a real good bargain. The fact that there's always going to be the people like myself and I think like you that probably are going to want to have all the extra custom stuff done, But let's face it, in the real world, for a using tool for a gun to use for self-defense or like IPSC limited class competition, this gun has everything that you need.
I'm impressed. I think there's probably going to be another Wilson pistol I'm going to have to own.